On Father's Day, my son-in-law and my daughter, who hadn't spoken to me in 7 years, invited me to a family dinner. As I was getting ready, my 11-year-old granddaughter called me, "Grandpa, don't come here. Mom and Dad are really mean." Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. 7 years. 7 long, silent years since I'd heard my daughter's voice, and suddenly there it was on my answering machine, sweet as honey and twice as surprising. "Hi, Dad, it's Aurora. I know it's been a while, but Jason and I were talking and we think it's time. Would you like to come for dinner on Father's Day? Zoe keeps asking about her grandpa, and well..." Her voice trailed off, but I could hear something underneath it. Hope? Regret? "Anyway, 6 o'clock on Sunday. We'd really love to see you." Aka. I must have played that message 20 times, sitting there in my empty kitchen, staring at the phone like it might suddenly explain the miracle that had just occurred. Aurora wanted to see me. After all this time, after the harsh words and slammed doors, after being told I wasn't welcome at my own granddaughter's birthday parties or school plays, she was inviting me back. My hand shook as I reached for my best shirt in the closet. The navy blue one that Margaret had always said brought out my eyes. It still had the dry cleaning tag on it from her funeral 7 years ago, the last time Aurora and I had been in the same room. That terrible day when everything fell apart. "You never cared about Mom anyway," Aurora had screamed at me over Margaret's casket. "All those years she was sick, where were you? Working, always working. Well, don't expect us to take care of you when you get old. You're on your own, just like you left us." I'd tried to explain, tried to tell her about the medical bills, about working double shifts to keep our house, about how I'd held Margaret's hand every single night in that hospital room. But Aurora wouldn't listen. Jason just stood there behind her, his arm around her shoulders, nodding along with everything she said. And little 4-year-old Zoe, confused and crying, reaching for me as they walked away. That was the last time I saw them. But now, folding the shirt carefully and laying out my good pants, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Maybe Aurora had finally understood. Maybe she'd realized that families need each other, especially as we get older. I was 62 now, and those empty evenings were getting longer. I'd just finished shaving when the phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but somehow I knew. "Hello? Grandpa?" The voice was small, whispered, urgent. "Grandpa, is that you? Zoe?" My heart nearly stopped. My granddaughter, now 11 years old, calling me for the first time in 7 years. "Sweetheart, how did you get this number?" "I found it in Daddy's phone. Grandpa, listen to me." Her voice dropped even lower, and I could hear fear in it. Real fear. "Don't come here tonight. Please don't come." "What? Zoe, what are you talking about? Your mother invited me for dinner." "I know, but Grandpa..." She was crying now, trying to whisper and sob at the same time. "They're not good people. Mama and Daddy, they hurt me when I ask about you. They say mean things. They made me promise never to call you, but I had to warn you because..." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, my blood turning to ice. I immediately called back, but it went straight to voicemail. I tried again, and again. Nothing. What did she mean? They hurt her? What kind of hurt? My mind raced through possibilities, each one worse than the last. And why was she warning me not to come? What were Aurora and Jason planning? I sank onto my bed, still holding the phone, my good shirt forgotten. For 7 years, I'd imagined this reunion. I'd pictured Aurora apologizing, maybe crying a little as we hugged. I'd dreamed of Zoe running into my arms, of Jason shaking my hand like a man, of all of us sitting around their dinner table like a real family again. But Zoe's voice kept echoing in my head. "Don't come here tonight. They're not good people." I looked at myself in the mirror, half-dressed for a dinner that might be a trap. My reflection showed an old man, grayer and more worn than I remembered. When had I gotten so old? When had the lines around my eyes gotten so deep? Margaret would have known what to do. She always knew how to handle Aurora's moods, how to smooth over family arguments. But Margaret was gone, and I'd been navigating this alone for 7 years. I checked the time, 4:30, an hour and a half until I was supposed to be there. I could still go. Maybe Zoe was just scared of getting in trouble for calling me. Kids sometimes exaggerate, right? But that fear in her voice, that wasn't exaggeration. That was terror. I tried calling the number again. Still voicemail. I tried Aurora's house phone, a number I'd memorized years ago but never used. It rang and rang. No answer. My neighbor, Mrs. Chen, knocked on my door just as I was pacing between the kitchen and living room for the 100th time. "William, you look upset. Everything okay?" I considered telling her everything, but how could I explain? My daughter, who hasn't spoken to me in 7 years, suddenly invited me for dinner, but my granddaughter called to warn me not to come because they're not good people? It sounded insane, even to me. "I'm fine, just family stuff," I managed. She nodded knowingly. Family is complicated, but you know what I always tell my children? Trust your gut. If something feels wrong, it probably is. After she left, I stood in my living room looking at the framed photo of Zoe from her 4th birthday, the last picture I had of her. She was laughing, chocolate cake smeared on her face, reaching toward the camera, toward me, because I'd been the one taking the picture. "They hurt me when I ask about you," she'd said. That decided it. Whatever Aurora and Jason were planning, I wasn't going to let them use my granddaughter as bait. I needed to know what was really going on in that house, and I needed to make sure Zoe was safe. But I also needed to be smart about it. If they were planning something, walking in unprepared would be stupid. I needed information first. I changed out of my good shirt and into dark clothes. If I couldn't get answers over the phone, I'd have to get them another way. I knew Aurora's neighborhood, knew the layout of their house from the few times I'd driven by over the years, hoping for a glimpse of my granddaughter. As I drove toward their subdivision, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles were white. Zoe's frightened voice kept playing in my head, mixing with Aurora's sweet invitation in a way that made my stomach churn. 7 years of silence ended with an invitation that might be a trap and a warning that might save my life. What had my family become? I parked 3 houses down from Aurora's place, behind a large SUV that would hide my car from view. The neighborhood looked exactly the same as it had 7 years ago. Perfectly manicured lawns and matching mailboxes. The kind of place where people minded their own business and kept their secrets behind closed doors. Their house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, a 2-story colonial with white shutters that Margaret had helped them pick out when they first bought it. Back when I was still welcome, back when I was still family. I sat there for 20 minutes, trying to work up the nerve to get closer. What exactly was I planning to do? Spy on my own daughter? Look through their windows like some kind of stalker? But then I thought of Zoe's terrified whisper, and I got out of the car. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. I used those shadows to move closer, staying behind the neighbors' hedges until I could see into Aurora's backyard. The kitchen window was lit up, giving me a perfect view inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. Aurora was pacing back and forth in the kitchen, gesturing wildly with her hands. Even from outside, I could see she was upset, angry. Jason sat at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of him, occasionally pointing at something and nodding. And Zoe. My heart broke when I saw Zoe. She was sitting in the corner, on the floor, pressed against the wall like she was trying to make herself invisible. Her thin shoulders were hunched, and she kept wiping her eyes. I crept closer, grateful for the bushes that lined their property. The kitchen window was cracked open slightly, probably for the evening breeze, and I could just make out their voices. "Told you she was going to be a problem," Jason was saying, his voice sharp with irritation. "Kids can't keep their mouths shut." "She knows better than to call him," Aurora snapped back. "I made sure of that. The last time she even mentioned his name, she couldn't sit down for a week." My stomach lurched. They were talking about Zoe, about punishing her for trying to contact me. "Well, she obviously called him anyway," Jason continued, shuffling through the papers. "The question is, do we think he'll still come?" Aurora stopped pacing and looked toward Zoe, who seemed to shrink even smaller against the wall. "Did you tell him not to come, Zoe? Did you ruin everything?" Zoe's voice was so quiet I almost missed it. I didn't want Grandpa to get hurt." "Hurt?" Aurora laughed, but there was no humor in it. "The only person who's going to get hurt is you if you've messed this up for us. Do you know how much money we're talking about? Do you know what happens to this family if we don't get that house?" "House? What house?" I pressed closer to the window, straining to hear. Jason picked up one of the papers and waved it in the air. "Your grandfather is sitting on a gold mine, Zoe. That house your grandmother left him is worth $500,000, plus whatever else she left in savings and investments. All we need is his signature on these transfer documents." Transfer documents? They wanted me to sign over Margaret's house. The house where I'd lived with my wife for 35 years. Where Aurora had grown up, where every room held memories of the life we'd built together. "But what if he won't sign them?" Zoe asked, and even through my shock, I felt proud of her for asking the question that mattered. Aurora and Jason exchanged a look that made my skin crawl. "He will," Aurora said finally. "He's lonely, desperate for family. We invite him back in, make him feel loved and wanted, and he'll sign anything to keep us happy, especially after 7 years of being cut off from his only granddaughter." "And if he doesn't?" Jason pressed. Aurora's smile was cold. "Then we remind him that he's getting old, and old people sometimes have accidents, fall downstairs, forget to turn off the gas. You know how it is." The papers in Jason's hands weren't just transfer documents. I could see now that some of them looked official, legal. One looked like a will, my will. They'd forged my will. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. This wasn't about reconciliation or family dinners or Father's Day. This was about money. Margaret's money, my money, the life we'd built together that they wanted to steal. And they were willing to threaten an old man to get it. Maybe even worse than threaten. I had to get out of there, had to think. But as I turned to leave, I heard Zoe speak up again. "What about me?" she asked, her voice tiny but brave. "What happens to me after you take Grandpa's house?" The silence that followed that question was the most chilling thing I'd ever heard. Finally, Jason answered, "You'll do what you're told just like always, and if you ever try to contact your grandfather again, or tell anyone about tonight, you'll find out just how creative we can get with punishments." Zoe started crying then. Quiet little sobs that she was clearly trying to muffle. My granddaughter, my beautiful little granddaughter, who used to build pillow forts with me and ask me to read the same bedtime story 5 times in a row, was sitting on that kitchen floor terrified of her own parents. I wanted to burst through that door, grab Zoe, and get her out of there. But I forced myself to think rationally. If I confronted them now with no witnesses and no proof except what I'd overheard, what would happen to Zoe after I left? No. I needed to be smarter than that. I needed evidence, and I needed help. I carefully backed away from the window, using the growing darkness to hide my retreat. My hands were shaking so badly, I could barely get my car keys out of my pocket. As I drove home, pieces started falling into place. The 7 years of silence hadn't been about grief or anger over Margaret's death. It had been about isolating me, making sure I had no one to turn to when they made their move. They'd been waiting, planning, probably watching me all this time, and they'd been abusing Zoe to keep her quiet about it. My phone rang just as I pulled into my driveway. Aurora's name appeared on the screen, and I let it ring twice before answering, trying to keep my voice steady. "Hello? Dad?" Aurora's voice was bright and cheerful, the complete opposite of the cold, calculating woman I'd just watched through that window. "I was just calling to confirm dinner. 6 o'clock, right? I'm making your favorite pot roast." She remembered my favorite meal. Of course she did. She'd probably researched everything about me, figured out exactly which buttons to push to make me trust her. "Actually, Aurora," I said slowly, "I'm not feeling very well. I think I might have to skip dinner tonight." There was a pause. When she spoke again, her voice had an edge to it. "Oh, that's disappointing. Zoe was really looking forward to seeing you." Using my granddaughter as leverage, even now. "Maybe another time?" "Well," Aurora said, and I could hear her forcing the sweetness back into her voice. "Maybe you could just stop by for a few minutes. I have some papers from Mom's estate that I need you to look at. Legal stuff that can't wait." There it was, the real reason for the invitation. "What kind of papers?" "Oh, you know, boring legal documents. But they need your signature, and I thought it would be nice to take care of family business over a family dinner." I closed my eyes, thinking of Zoe crying on that kitchen floor, of Aurora's casual talk about accidents for old people who didn't cooperate. "I'll be there," I said. because now I knew what they were planning, and I was going to stop them. But first, I had to save my granddaughter. I spent the hour before dinner making preparations they'd never expect from a lonely old man. First, I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen, and asked her to check on me in exactly 2 hours. If I didn't answer my door, she was to call the police and tell them I'd gone to Aurora's house and was concerned for my safety. Then I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I recorded a video on my phone explaining everything I'd overheard and seen. If something happened to me, at least there would be evidence. Finally, I tucked a small digital recorder into my shirt pocket, the kind I'd used for taking notes back when I was still working construction. The red record light was barely visible, hidden behind my jacket. When I pulled up to Aurora's house at exactly 6 o'clock, the porch light was on and everything looked perfectly normal. Welcoming, even. You'd never know that inside. 2 people were plotting to rob an old man and terrorize a child. Aurora opened the door before I could knock, throwing her arms around me in a hug that felt as fake as her smile looked. "Dad! Oh, it's so good to see you." She stepped back, holding me at arm's length, like she was examining me. "You look wonderful. Doesn't he look wonderful, Jason?" Jason appeared behind her, extending his hand with what I'm sure he thought was a warm smile. "William, great to see you. It's been too long." Too long, like it had been his choice to stay away. "Where's Zoe?" I asked, looking past them into the house. "Oh, she's upstairs finishing her homework," Aurora said quickly. "You know how kids are with school, but she'll be down for dinner, don't worry." The house smelled like pot roast, just like Aurora had promised. She'd gone all out, apparently, because I could also smell fresh bread and what might have been apple pie. All my favorites, perfectly calculated to make me feel loved and welcome. It made me sick. Come in," Jason said, putting his hand on my back and guiding me toward the dining room. "Aurora's been cooking all day. She wanted everything to be perfect for your first dinner back home." Back home. As if this had ever been my home. The dining room table was set with what I recognized as Margaret's good china, the set with the tiny blue flowers that she'd inherited from her mother. Seeing those dishes, knowing that Aurora was using them as props in this elaborate deception, made my chest tight with anger. "I hope you don't mind," Aurora said, noticing me, staring at the plates. "I thought Mom would want us to use these for a special occasion." Special occasion. Like manipulating her father into signing away his inheritance was something to celebrate. "They're beautiful," I managed to say. "Your mother loved those dishes." Aurora's smile faltered for just a second, like she'd forgotten that I might actually have feelings about seeing Margaret's things used this way. But she recovered quickly. "She did. She always said they were for family dinners." Aurora touched one of the plates gently. "I'm so glad we're finally having one again." Jason disappeared into the kitchen and returned with a bottle of wine. "I thought we could have a toast," he said, pouring 3 glasses of red wine. "To family and to new beginnings." New beginnings, right. I accepted the glass, but didn't drink. "Where did you say Zoe was?" "Homework," Aurora repeated, "but she'll be down soon. She's so excited to see you, Dad. She talks about you all the time." That was interesting, considering what I'd overheard about punishing her for even mentioning my name. "Does she?" I took a small sip of the wine, watching their faces carefully. "What kind of things does she say?" Aurora and Jason exchanged a quick glance, so fast I almost missed it. "Oh, you know," Aurora said vaguely. "She remembers the stories you used to tell her, the games you played. She misses her grandpa." "That's sweet. I've missed her too." I set down my wine glass and leaned back in my chair. "You know, Aurora, I have to ask, why now? After 7 years, why invite me back now?" Another glance between them, longer this time. "Well," Aurora said slowly, "we've been thinking a lot about family lately, about how important it is, especially as we all get older, and Jason and I realized that we were being petty, holding on to old grievances." "What grievances were those?" Aurora's smile tightened. "You know, the things we said after Mom's funeral. We were grieving, saying things we didn't mean. We should have reached out sooner." "What things specifically?" Now Jason jumped in, his voice smooth as silk. "I think what Aurora means is that everyone was emotional that day, Loss makes people say things they regret. The important thing is that we're here now, together again." He raised his wine glass. "To putting the past behind us." They both looked at me expectantly, waiting for me to join their toast. Instead, I asked the question I really wanted answered. "How's Zoe doing in school?" "Fine," Aurora said quickly. "She's doing fine. Good grades, lots of friends." "No problems? No issues with behavior or anything?" "No, why would you ask that?" "Just curious. Sometimes kids act out when there's tension in the family. I was wondering if our estrangement had affected her." Aurora's laugh sounded forced. "Oh no, nothing like that. Zoe's a good girl. She does what she's told." The way she said it made my skin crawl, like Zoe was a trained dog instead of a child. "I'd love to see her," I said. "Maybe she could come down and say hello before we eat?" "Actually," Jason said, "we thought it would be nice to take care of some business first. Adult conversation, you know? Then, when Zoe comes down, we can focus completely on family time." "Business. Here we go. What kind of business?" Aurora got up from her chair and walked to the sideboard, where I now noticed a manila folder sitting next to the serving dishes. She brought it back to the table and set it down in front of me. "Just some paperwork related to Mom's estate," she said. "There are a few loose ends that need to be tied up, and since you're the executor..." I opened the folder and found exactly what I'd expected. Transfer documents for the house, a revised will, some kind of financial power of attorney form. All of it designed to give Aurora and Jason control over everything Margaret had left me. "These are pretty comprehensive documents," I said, flipping through the pages. "Did you have a lawyer draw these up?" "Oh yes," Jason said. "We wanted to make sure everything was legal and proper. No point in doing things halfway." "And what exactly would these papers accomplish?" Aurora leaned forward, her voice taking on a more serious tone. "Dad, you're 62 years old. You're living alone in that big house, trying to maintain it all by yourself. Wouldn't it be easier to let us handle the property management side of things? You could stay in the house as long as you want, but we'd take care of all the maintenance, the taxes, the insurance." "For free?" "Well, not for free exactly. We'd need to be listed as co-owners to handle the legal aspects, but it's really just a formality. A formality that would give them the right to sell the house out from under me anytime they wanted. And this will..." I held up the document. "This changes quite a few things from my current will." Jason nodded earnestly. "We just thought it made sense to update it, make sure everything goes smoothly when the time comes." When the time comes, like they were already planning my funeral. I was about to respond when I heard footsteps on the stairs. All three of us looked toward the hallway as Zoe appeared in the doorway. My granddaughter looked so much older than 11. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. She was wearing a long-sleeved shirt despite the warm evening, and when she saw me, her face went white with panic. "Grandpa," she whispered, "you came." The devastation in her voice told me everything I needed to know. She'd tried to warn me, and I'd come anyway. In her 11-year-old mind, that meant I was walking into a trap because of her. "Hi, sweetheart," I said gently. "I missed you." Tears started flowing down her cheeks immediately. "I missed you too, Grandpa. So much." Aurora's voice cut through the moment like a knife. "Zoe, what did I tell you about coming downstairs before we called you?" Zoe flinched visibly. "I'm sorry, Mama. I just wanted to see Grandpa. Go back upstairs now." "But now, Zoe." I stood up from my chair. Actually, I'd like Zoe to stay. I haven't seen my granddaughter in 7 years. Surely the paperwork can wait a few minutes. Aurora's mask slipped completely for just a second, and I saw the cold anger underneath. "Dad, we really need to get these documents signed. The lawyer is expecting them first thing Monday morning." "What's the rush?" Jason cleared his throat. "Well, there are some time-sensitive issues with the estate, tax implications and such." "What tax implications?" They looked at each other again, and I realized they hadn't prepared for questions. They'd expected a lonely old man so grateful for family contact that he'd sign anything they put in front of him. They'd underestimated me, and they'd definitely underestimated how much I was willing to do to protect my granddaughter. "You know what?" I said, closing the folder and pushing it away from me. "I think I'd like to have my own lawyer look at these before I sign anything, just to be safe." The silence that followed was deafening. Aurora's face went pale, then flushed red. Jason's hands clenched into fists on the table, and Zoe, standing in that doorway, looked more terrified than ever, because we all knew the real conversation was about to begin. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Aurora's perfectly composed facade cracked completely, and for the first time in 7 years, I saw my daughter's true face. It wasn't pretty. "Your own lawyer?" she repeated, her voice tight with barely controlled fury. "Dad, that's really not necessary. These are simple documents. Simple documents that transfer ownership of my house and change my will," I said calmly. "I think any reasonable person would want legal advice before signing something like that." Jason leaned forward in his chair, trying to look reasonable. "William, I understand your caution, but there are deadlines involved here. The tax year ends soon, and if we don't get these filed—" "What deadlines, Jason?" I interrupted. "What taxes?" "The property taxes on the house are current. I pay them myself every year." His mouth opened and closed like a fish. He hadn't expected me to know the details of my own finances. Aurora stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Zoe, go to your room." "But Mama—" "Go to your room." Zoe looked at me with pleading eyes, but I couldn't help her. Not yet. She turned and ran up the stairs, and I heard a door slam somewhere above us. The moment Zoe was gone, Aurora's voice turned venomous. "You stubborn old fool. Do you have any idea what we're offering you?" "I have a pretty good idea," I said. "You're offering to steal my house." Jason shot to his feet. "Now wait just a minute." "No, you wait." I stood up too, and even though I was older, I was still taller than both of them. "I know what this is about. I heard you talking in the kitchen earlier." Aurora went white. "You were spying on us?" I was trying to figure out why my granddaughter was so terrified that she called to warn me not to come. "Now I know." "Zoe called you?" Jason's voice was dangerously quiet. "When?" "This afternoon. She begged me not to come because she was afraid you'd hurt me. Apparently, with good reason." Aurora laughed, but it sounded more like a snarl. "Hurt you?" "Dad, you're being paranoid. We invited you to dinner." "You invited me to dinner so you could trick me into signing over my inheritance. Margaret's inheritance. The house she and I bought together, the money she saved for 40 years, the life we built." "A life that's wasted on you," Aurora snapped, all pretense of affection gone. "You're living alone in a house that's too big for you, sitting on assets you'll never use. Meanwhile, Jason and I are struggling to keep this family afloat." "Struggling how?" Jason and Aurora exchanged another look, and I realized there was something they hadn't told me yet. "We made some investments that didn't pan out," Jason said carefully. "Business ventures that seemed solid at the time." "What kind of business ventures?" "It doesn't matter what kind," Aurora said impatiently. "The point is, we need capital to get back on our feet, and you're sitting on a gold mine doing nothing with it. So, you decided to steal it." "We decided to keep it in the family," Aurora corrected. "Where it belongs. You're not going to live forever, Dad. This way, at least the money goes to good use instead of sitting in some bank account." The casual way she talked about my death made my blood run cold. "And if I don't cooperate?" Jason stepped closer to me, and I caught a whiff of alcohol on his breath. He'd been drinking before I arrived, building up his courage. "Old people have accidents," he said quietly. "Falls, kitchen fires, gas leaks. Tragic, but these things happen." So Aurora hadn't been exaggerating in the kitchen. They really were willing to kill me for the inheritance. "And what about Zoe?" I asked. "What happens to her when you murder her grandfather?" Aurora's face twisted with something ugly. "Zoe will do what she's told, just like she always has. She's learned not to cause trouble. By being beaten into submission? By being disciplined when she misbehaves," Jason said. "Something you never understood when Aurora was growing up. Maybe if you'd been a better father, she wouldn't have had to learn the hard way." That stung, because part of me had always wondered if I'd failed Aurora somehow. If I'd worked too many hours, missed too many school plays, been too tired to listen when she needed me. But looking at her now, at the cold calculation in her eyes, at the casual way she talked about murdering me, I realized something important. This wasn't my fault. "You know what, Aurora?" I said, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. "You're right about one thing. I wasn't a perfect father. I worked too much, missed too much. But I never once considered hurting you to get what I wanted. You hurt me every day, she shot back. Every time you chose work over family, every time you were too tired to care about my problems, every time you made me feel like I wasn't important enough. So this is revenge? This is justice. I looked around the dining room at Margaret's good china set out for this elaborate deception, at the fake family dinner that was really a robbery in disguise, at the manila folder full of forged documents. Where did I go wrong with you? I asked, more to myself than to her. But Aurora heard it and laughed bitterly. You went wrong the day you decided your job was more important than your daughter. You went wrong when you let Mom handle everything while you hid at work. You went wrong when you came to her funeral and acted like you were the grieving widower when everyone knew you barely spent time with her the last 5 years of her life. I spent every night at the hospital with your mother. After work, after you'd already given the best part of your day to strangers, the accusation hit home because there was truth in it. I had worked long hours. I had been tired when I came home. I had let Margaret handle most of the parenting while I focused on providing for the family, but that didn't justify this. Even if all of that is true, I said slowly, it doesn't give you the right to steal from me. And it sure as hell doesn't give you the right to abuse my granddaughter. Abuse? Aurora's voice rose to a shriek. You want to talk about abuse? Try growing up with a father who was never there. Try being a kid who had to compete with construction sites and overtime shifts for her dad's attention. I was trying to provide for you. You were trying to avoid us. The words hung in the air between us, raw and painful. Maybe she was right. Maybe I had used work as an escape from the chaos of family life. Maybe I had failed her in ways I'd never admitted to myself. But that was 30 years ago. This was now. Okay, I said quietly. Let's say you're right about everything. Let's say I was a terrible father and a terrible husband. Does that justify what you're doing to Zoe? For the first time, Aurora looked uncertain. We're not doing anything to Zoe. She's terrified of you. She tried to warn me away from this dinner because she was afraid you'd hurt me. What kind of punishment has she been getting that would make her that scared? She's been told not to contact you, Jason said. When she disobeys, there are consequences. What consequences? Nothing she doesn't deserve. Show me. What? If you're so sure the consequences are appropriate, show me. Call Zoe down here and show me what you do to her when she disobeys. Aurora and Jason looked at each other, and I saw guilt flash across both their faces. That's what I thought, I said. You know what you're doing is wrong, or you wouldn't be hiding it. I picked up the manila folder and tore it in half. I'm not signing these documents. I'm not giving you my house or my money, and I'm not letting you continue to abuse my granddaughter. Jason moved toward me, his face flushed with anger. You can't stop us, old man. You have no idea what we're capable of. Actually, I do. I pulled out my phone and showed them the recording app that had been running the entire time. I've been recording this whole conversation, threats, admissions of abuse, plans to commit fraud, all of it. Aurora lunged for the phone, but I pulled it away. It's already uploaded to the cloud. Even if you destroy this phone, the evidence still exists. You bastard, she hissed. You set us up. I protected myself just like Zoe tried to protect me. Jason was looking around the room like he was calculating his chances of overpowering me and destroying the phone. I could see the desperation in his eyes, the panic of a cornered animal. Here's what's going to happen, I said, backing toward the front door. I'm leaving. I'm going straight to the police with this recording, and I'm filing for emergency custody of Zoe. You can't prove we've done anything wrong, Aurora said, but her voice was shaking. The recording proves you threatened to kill me for insurance money. And I'm pretty sure when social services examine Zoe, they'll find evidence of the consequences you've been giving her. I reached the front door and put my hand on the knob. You have one chance to make this right. Give me Zoe voluntarily and I won't press charges. Keep fighting me and you'll both end up in prison. She's our daughter, Aurora whispered, and she's my granddaughter, the granddaughter you've been using as a weapon against me for 7 years. I opened the door and stepped onto the porch. You have until tomorrow morning to decide. As I walked away from that house, I could hear them fighting inside, their voices rising in accusations and panic, but I didn't look back. I had a phone call to make to the police and a granddaughter to save. The police station at 9 o'clock on a Sunday night was quieter than I'd expected. Detective Sarah Martinez, a woman about Aurora's age with tired eyes and graying hair, listened to my recording twice before setting down her notepad and rubbing her temples. "Mr. Holloway, this is definitely concerning, but I have to ask, how did you come to be recording this conversation?" I told her about Zoe's phone call, about watching through the kitchen window, about the 7 years of enforced silence. With each detail, her expression grew more serious. "You're alleging child abuse based on what you overheard?" "I'm alleging child abuse based on what my granddaughter told me directly. She said they hurt her when she asks about me. She was terrified enough to risk calling me to warn me away." Detective Martinez made more notes. "We'll need to interview the child, of course, but first, let me ask you something. Do you have any idea why your daughter and son-in-law might be so desperate for money that they'd resort to this?" I shook my head. "Jason mentioned failed investments, but they were vague about it." He pulled out her computer and typed for a few minutes. "Jason Morrison, correct? And Aurora Morrison, formerly Holloway?" "Yes." Her eyebrows went up as she read whatever was on her screen. "Mr. Holloway, did you know that your son-in-law has been arrested twice in the past 3 years for illegal gambling?" My stomach dropped. "No." "And that your daughter filed for bankruptcy 18 months ago?" "What?" Detective Martinez turned her screen toward me. "They're in debt to some very dangerous people, Mr. Holloway, the kind who don't accept payment plans." I stared at the bankruptcy filing on her screen, at Aurora's name typed in official legal documents. The house I'd been sitting in tonight, the one that looked so perfect and maintained, was in foreclosure. They owed money to credit card companies, medical providers, and something called Riverside Financial Group. "What's Riverside Financial Group?" "Loan sharks," Detective Martinez said bluntly. "High-interest loans for people who can't get credit anywhere else. The kind of people who send collectors to break kneecaps when payments are late." The pieces started falling into place with sickening clarity. The desperation in Aurora's voice when she talked about keeping the family afloat. Jason's barely controlled panic when I refused to sign the documents. The timeline of everything. How long have they owed this money? According to this, the first loan was taken out 2 years ago. They've been making minimum payments, but the interest is compounding faster than they can pay it down. As of last month, they owe just over $200,000. $200,000. More than enough to kill for. "There's something else," Detective Martinez continued, clicking through more screens. 3 months ago, someone took out a life insurance policy on you." The room started spinning. "What? $1 million policy? The beneficiary is listed as Aurora Morrison, your daughter and nearest living relative." I gripped the arms of my chair, trying to process what she was telling me. They were planning to kill me for insurance money. It's looking that way. The policy has a suicide clause that expires in, 2 weeks from today. Meaning? Meaning after that date, even if your death is ruled a suicide, the insurance company has to pay out. It removes one avenue of investigation that might prevent them from collecting. My mind flashed back to Jason's casual mention of accidents that happen to old people. Kitchen fires, gas leaks, falls downstairs, all things that could be made to look like accidents, or in a worst-case scenario, like an old man who couldn't cope with loneliness, had decided to end his own life. "They've been planning this for months," I said, more to myself than to her. "At least. And Mr. Holloway, there's something else you need to know. We ran a background check on your daughter while you've been sitting here." I wasn't sure I wanted to hear what came next. "She's been seeing a psychiatrist. The records are sealed, of course, but the appointment started right around the time she cut contact with you 7 years ago, and they increased dramatically after she took out the insurance policy." "What does that mean?" "It could mean she's been building a paper trail to support a claim that you were mentally unstable, depressed, possibly suicidal. If something happened to you, she'd have medical testimony that your death wasn't surprising given your mental state." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd thought possible. Not only had Aurora been planning to rob me, she'd been systematically destroying my reputation to cover her tracks. Every conversation with doctors, every appointment, every session had been building toward my death. The psychiatrist doesn't know, of course, Detective Martinez continued. She's probably been told that Aurora is concerned about her elderly father who's been acting strangely since his wife died. Classic signs of depression, social isolation, that sort of thing. But I haven't been acting strangely. No, but who would contradict Aurora's account? You've been isolated from the family for 7 years. No one has independent knowledge of your mental state except your neighbors, and how often do they really see you? Mrs. Chen would contradict it, I thought. My co-workers from before I retired would contradict it. But would anyone listen to them over a daughter's tearful testimony about her father's decline? Detective Martinez closed her computer and looked at me seriously. Mr. Holloway, I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? What do you mean? I mean, Aurora and Jason know that you have evidence against them now. They're desperate people who owe money to dangerous loan sharks. They had a plan to make $1 million in 2 weeks, and you've just destroyed that plan. I'm worried about what they might do next. The thought hadn't occurred to me, but now it sent ice through my veins. You think they'd try something tonight? I think desperate people do desperate things. And with that much money at stake, she shrugged. Let's just say I wouldn't want to be alone in my house tonight if I were you. I thought about my quiet neighborhood, my house set back from the street, my elderly neighbors who went to bed early and wouldn't hear anything unusual. I thought about how easy it would be for Jason to break in, how a burglary gone wrong might look to investigators who didn't know about the insurance policy and the debts. What about Zoe? We'll do a welfare check first thing in the morning. But tonight, my advice is to find somewhere else to sleep. I nodded, my mind already working through possibilities. Mrs. Chen had a guest room she'd offered me before when I was having work done on my house, or I could get a hotel room. Detective Martinez, what happens next? With the investigation, I mean. We'll interview your granddaughter tomorrow with a social worker present. We'll examine her for signs of abuse. We'll look into the financial records more thoroughly, maybe get a warrant to search their house for evidence of the insurance fraud and the forged documents. And then, if we find what I think we're going to find, we'll arrest them both. Fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, child abuse. They're looking at serious prison time. I should have felt satisfied, but all I felt was tired. Tired and sad and angry that it had come to this. There's one more thing, Detective Martinez said as I got up to leave. The life insurance policy, it was purchased through an online broker, but someone had to provide medical information about you. Height, weight, health history, that sort of thing. How would they get that? Well, if someone had access to your medical records, say if they were listed as an emergency contact with your doctor's office, or if they had power of attorney for medical decisions, I felt sick. I never gave Aurora power of attorney for anything. No, but you might have signed something that gave her access to your medical information. Maybe something that seemed innocent at the time, like an emergency contact form or a medical release. I tried to think back over the past few years. Had I signed anything like that? Had Aurora ever asked me to update my emergency contacts or medical information? And then I remembered. About 6 months ago, Aurora had called me. It was one of the few times she'd initiated contact in 7 years, and she'd been sweet, concerned. She said she'd been thinking about what would happen if I got sick or had an emergency, and wouldn't it be smart to make sure someone could access my medical records if needed. She'd mailed me a form to sign, something from my doctor's office about updating my emergency contacts and medical information release. I'd signed it without really reading it, just grateful that she seemed to be reaching out, seemed to care about my well-being. Now I realized it hadn't been concern at all. It had been reconnaissance, gathering the information she'd need to take out that life insurance policy and to build her case that I was mentally unstable. She had me sign a medical release form about 6 months ago, I told Detective Martinez. She nodded grimly. That's probably how she got the information for the insurance application, and how she's been monitoring your health, making sure you were still a good candidate for the policy. A good candidate. Like I was livestock being evaluated for slaughter. Mr. Holloway, I know this is a lot to process, but I need you to understand something. Your daughter and her husband aren't just desperate, they're dangerous. the money they owe, the timeline they're working on, the fact that you've now exposed their plan, all of that adds up to a very volatile situation. What should I do? Stay somewhere safe tonight. Don't go home alone. Don't meet with them under any circumstances, even if they call claiming there's an emergency with Zoe. If they contact you at all, call me immediately. She handed me her business card. My cell phone number is on the back. Don't hesitate to use it. As I walked out of the police station, my phone buzzed with a text message. Aurora's name appeared on the screen and my blood ran cold as I read her words. Dad, we need to talk. There's been a misunderstanding. Meet me at the house in an hour so we can work this out. It's about Zoe. I showed the message to Detective Martinez, who had walked me to the parking lot. Don't respond, she said immediately, and definitely don't go there. But what if something really is wrong with Zoe? Then they'll call 911, not you. This is exactly what I was worried about. They're trying to lure you into a vulnerable position. I looked at my phone again at Aurora's message and realized that my daughter was no longer the person I'd raised. Maybe she never had been. Maybe the sweet little girl I remembered had just been better at hiding her true nature. Or maybe desperation had turned her into something I didn't recognize. Either way, Detective Martinez was right. Aurora and Jason were dangerous now, and I needed to stay as far away from them as possible. At least until tomorrow, when hopefully Zoe would finally be safe. I spent that night in a hotel room across town, staring at the ceiling and checking my phone every few minutes. Aurora sent 3 more messages, each one more desperate than the last. By midnight, she was texting that Zoe was asking for me, that they'd talked things over and realized they'd made a terrible mistake, that if I'd just come home we could work everything out as a family. The word family in her messages made me sick. At 6 in the morning, Detective Martinez called. We're heading to the house now to interview Zoe. Do you want to be there? Will that be allowed? If Zoe asks for you, yes. If not, you'll have to wait outside. I drove to Aurora's neighborhood with my hands shaking on the steering wheel. 3 police cars were already parked outside the house, and I could see neighbors peeking out their windows at the unusual activity. Detective Martinez met me at the curb. Social Services is inside with Zoe now. Aurora and Jason are not happy. Through the open front door I could hear Aurora's voice, high and hysterical. This is harassment. You can't just barge into our home and interrogate our daughter. Ma'am, please step back, came another voice. We have a court order for this interview. I waited on the sidewalk, my heart pounding. After what felt like hours but was probably only 20 minutes, a woman in a business suit came outside. She introduced herself as Linda Chen, a social worker with Child Protective Services. Mr. Holloway, your granddaughter would like to speak with you. But first, I need to prepare you for what you're going to see. My stomach clenched. How bad is it? Zoe has injuries consistent with ongoing physical abuse, belt marks on her back and legs, some of them fairly recent. She's also severely underweight and shows signs of emotional trauma. I closed my eyes, thinking of that scared little girl trying to warn me over the phone. Can I see her now? Linda nodded. She's been asking for you since we arrived. I followed her into the house, past Aurora, who was being questioned by another officer. She looked up at me as I walked by, and for a moment I saw something in her eyes that might have been regret. But then Jason started shouting about lawyers and harassment, and whatever I'd seen was gone. Zoe was sitting at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd seen her cowering on the floor just yesterday. But today, she wasn't alone. A female police officer sat beside her, and when Zoe saw me, her face lit up with the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in 7 years. Grandpa! She jumped up and ran to me, throwing her thin arms around my waist. You came back for me. I hugged her carefully, feeling how fragile she was, how much weight she'd lost. Of course I came back, sweetheart. I'll always come back for you. Linda Chen sat down across from us. Zoe's been very brave, Mr. Holloway. She's told us about the punishments she received for trying to contact you, about the things she overheard her parents planning. What kinds of things? Zoe looked up at me with eyes too old for her 11-year-old face. They said they were going to make you have an accident, Grandpa. Like maybe you'd fall down the stairs or forget to turn off the stove. And then they'd get lots of money, and I wouldn't have to worry about you anymore. because you'd be in heaven with Grandma." The casual way she repeated their words made my blood run cold. How many times had she heard them planning my death? How long had she been living with that knowledge, too scared to tell anyone? "But I didn't want you to be in heaven yet," she continued. "I wanted you to come home. So I called you even though Mama said she'd use the belt again if I ever talked about you." Linda Chen made notes in her file. "Zoe, can you tell your grandfather about the other things? The punishments when you asked questions?" Zoe's small hand found mine. "When I asked why we didn't see you anymore, Daddy said it was because you didn't love us. But I remembered you did love us from before. So I kept asking, and that's when they started getting really mad." She rolled up her sleeve, showing me faded bruises on her upper arm. "This was from last month, when I asked if we could call you for my birthday. I had to bite my tongue to keep from cursing out loud. My granddaughter had been beaten for wanting to talk to me on her birthday. And when Mama found out I knew your phone number, she made me stand in the corner for the whole day without food. She said, if I ever called you, something really bad would happen to our family. But you called me anyway," I said softly. "I had to. I heard them talking about the accident plan, and I got scared. I didn't want them to hurt you, even if it meant they'd hurt me more." This brave little girl had risked her own safety to protect me. While her parents were planning my murder, she was the only one trying to save my life. Linda Chen closed her file and looked at me seriously. "Mr. Holloway, based on what we found here today, we're removing Zoe from this home immediately. The question is where she should go." "With me," I said without hesitation. "She should come home with me." "Dad, no." Aurora's voice came from the doorway. 2 police officers flanked her, but she was still trying to assert control. "You can't just take our daughter." "I'm not taking her," I said calmly. "Child Protective Services is removing her because you've been abusing her." "We've never abused anyone. Zoe, tell them. Tell them Mama and Daddy love you." Zoe pressed closer to me, her small body trembling. "I can't lie anymore, Mama. I'm tired of lying." Aurora's face crumpled, and for a moment she looked like the little girl I'd raised, scared and confused. "Zoe, please. We're a family." "Families don't hurt each other," Zoe said quietly. "Grandpa never hurt anyone." Jason appeared behind Aurora, his hands cuffed behind his back. "This is all your fault, you old bastard. If you just signed the papers, none of this would have happened." "If you'd just been decent parents, none of this would have happened," I replied. Detective Martinez stepped into the kitchen. "Mr. Holloway, we're arresting both Aurora and Jason Morrison on charges of conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit murder, child abuse, and elder abuse. The district attorney is also considering additional charges related to the forged documents." Aurora started crying then, deep sobs that shook her whole body. "Dad, please, please don't let them take me to jail. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." Part of me wanted to comfort her the way I had when she was small and scared. But I looked down at Zoe, at the bruises on her arms, at the fear that still lingered in her eyes, and I knew that some things couldn't be forgiven. "You made your choice, Aurora," I said quietly. "You chose money over family. You chose to hurt a child rather than ask for help. You chose to plan my murder rather than have an honest conversation about your problems." "We were desperate," Jason shouted, as the officers led him away. "You have no idea what kind of people we owe money to? Then you should have come to me for help, instead of planning to kill me for insurance money." As they were led away, Aurora looked back at me one more time. "Dad, please, don't turn Zoe against us. She's still our daughter." "No," I said firmly. "She's my granddaughter, and I'm going to make sure she's safe and loved and never has to be afraid again." The house fell quiet after Aurora and Jason were taken away. Linda Chen sat down with me and Zoe to discuss the next steps. "The emergency custody hearing is tomorrow," she explained. "Given the circumstances and Zoe's clear preference to live with you, I expect it to go smoothly. But there will be home visits, background checks, the usual process. Whatever you need," I said. "I just want her safe." Zoe looked up at me with those 2 serious eyes. "Grandpa, are Mama and Daddy going to prison?" I chose my words carefully. "They're in trouble for the things they did, sweetheart, but that's not for you to worry about. Your job is to be 11 years old and safe and happy." "Can I really live with you? In Grandma's house?" If you want to. She nodded vigorously. I want to. I want to see my room again, the one you made for me before. Is it still there? I thought of the spare room I'd prepared for babysitting visits that never came, the crib I'd bought secondhand, the books and toys I'd collected with hope in my heart. It's still there, I told her, waiting for you. 2 hours later, we were in my car driving toward home. Zoe sat in the passenger seat, a small bag of clothes in her lap, staring out the window at the familiar streets. Grandpa, she said quietly, why did Mama and Daddy want to hurt you? I thought about how to explain adult problems to a child who'd already seen too much. Sometimes when people are scared and desperate, they make very bad choices. They forgot how to be a family. But we remember, right? You and me? I reached over and squeezed her small hand. Yes, sweetheart, we remember. As we pulled into my driveway, I saw Mrs. Chen working in her garden next door. She looked up and waved, then did a double take when she saw Zoe. Is that your granddaughter? She called out. Yes, I called back. She's come to stay with me. Mrs. Chen smiled broadly. Wonderful. I'll make extra dumplings for dinner tonight. Inside the house, Zoe looked around with wide eyes, touching furniture and walls like she was reacquainting herself with a half-remembered dream. It smells the same, she said wonderfully, like Grandma's cookies and your coffee. I showed her to her room, the one I'd kept ready for 7 years. She sat on the small bed and looked around at the toys and books I'd collected, at the photos of her as a baby that I'd never taken down. You kept everything, she whispered. I never stopped hoping you'd come home. That night, after Mrs. Chen's dumplings and Zoe's first real laugh in years, I tucked my granddaughter into bed in her own room. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally, but she seemed more at peace than I'd seen her all day. Grandpa, she said sleepily, I'm sorry I couldn't save you sooner. Sweetheart, you did save me. You called to warn me, even though you knew you'd get in trouble. You were braver than I ever could have asked you to be. Are you going to be okay without Mama and Daddy? I thought about that question seriously. Aurora was my daughter, the little girl I'd taught to ride a bike and helped with homework. But she was also the woman who'd planned to murder me for money and abused a child to keep her quiet. I'm going to miss the daughter I thought I had, I said finally. But I'm not going to miss being afraid or alone, and I'm certainly not going to miss worrying about you. Zoe nodded solemnly. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, sweetheart, more than you know. 3 months later, I had permanent custody of Zoe. Aurora and Jason were both in prison, sentenced to 8 and 12 years, respectively. The house they'd been living in was sold to pay their debts, but it wasn't enough to cover what they owed. I heard through the legal proceedings that the loan sharks had written off the debt as a loss. Apparently, they'd decided that 2 people in prison weren't worth pursuing, especially after the media attention the case had generated. Zoe was gaining weight. Her bruises had healed, and she was laughing again. Real laughs, not the nervous giggles of a scared child. She'd started 6th grade at a new school, made friends, joined the art club. Sometimes she asked about her parents, and I told her the truth in age-appropriate ways. They'd made bad choices. They were facing the consequences. Maybe someday they'd be better people. But that wasn't our responsibility. Our responsibility was to build a new life together based on truth and love and respect. On Father's Day that year, exactly 1 year after the dinner that had changed everything, Zoe made me breakfast in bed. Burned toast and overcooked eggs, but it was the most delicious meal I'd ever eaten. Happy Father's Day, Grandpa, she said, climbing onto the bed beside me with her own plate. Thank you, sweetheart. Are you sad that Mama isn't here to call you today? I considered the question while I ate my burned toast. Was I sad? Or was I finally truly free? No, I said honestly. I'm not sad, I'm grateful. For what? For you. For second chances. For the fact that sometimes the most important phone calls come from the people we least expect. Zoe grinned and curled up against my side. I'm glad I called you that day. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. Outside, the sun was shining on our quiet street, on our small garden, on our peaceful life. We were safe. We were loved. We were family. And that was worth everything.